I wake up at 5:40 a.m. Not because I need to, because my body still thinks someone is waiting for me in the kitchen. The kettle goes on first. Old habit. Eleanor used to say, the water boiled faster if I filled it with cold, not warm. I never checked whether that was true. I just kept doing it. 38 years of marriage leaves marks deeper than wrinkles. The kitchen is quiet now. Too clean. One mug on the counter. The blue one with a chip on the rim. The one she dropped in 2014 and refused to throw away because it still works, doesn't it? It does. So do I technically. Toast. One slice. Butter scraped thin. I sit at the small table by the window, the one we bought from IKEA back when we still argued about money. Outside. The street light flickers even though it's already morning. City budget cuts. They save where they can. So do I. Or at least I used to. At 6:15, I open my laptop. Not for news. Not for emails. For the bank. The login page takes a second longer than it used to. Or maybe that's just me. Username. Password. The numbers appear neat and indifferent. Outgoing transfers. February 3rd, $2,400. February 17th, $1,150. February 28th, $3,600. All to the same name. My son, Daniel. I don't sigh anymore. I stopped doing that last year. Now I just nod, as if the screen could see me. As if agreement might make it easier. Mortgage, he'd said in January. Temporary in February. Emergency in March. There's always a word. Words are cheaper than interest. I'm 71 years old. Retired electrical engineer. 42 years at the same utility company. No scandals. No promotions worth bragging about. Just steady work and steady pay. Eleanor handled the groceries. I handled the bills. We paid off the house in 2009. Celebrated with cheap champagne and grilled chicken because that's who we were. Daniel was different. Ambitious. Restless. Always looking at something beyond the horizon. Even when he didn't know what it was. When his wife left him, took the kids, the furniture, and most of the patience. He came back to me with a folder of papers and a voice that sounded smaller than I remembered. I just need some help getting back on my feet, Dad. That was 5 years ago. I paid the first bill without thinking. $980 for utilities. Then the car insurance. Then the credit card minimums. Then the mortgage just this once. I kept a spreadsheet. Dates. Amounts. Notes in the margins. April 2021, $7,800. Legal fees, custody. September 2022, $12,400. Refinancing penalty. Total by December 2024, $186,300. Numbers don't lie. People do. At 7:00 a.m., my phone buzzes. Daniel's name lights up the screen. Morning, Dad, he says, voice brisk, already halfway somewhere else. I can hear traffic. Or maybe a cafe. Cups clinking. Espresso machine. Not cheap. Morning, I answer. So listen, he says, not listening at all. The bank messed up again. They're saying the escrow account is short. It's ridiculous. I'll send you the details. How much? I ask. A pause. A small one. Practiced. About 4,000. But it's just until next month. I swear. I look at the calendar on the wall. Eleanor's handwriting is still there on March. A dentist appointment she never made. All right, I say. Send it. Thanks, Dad. You're a lifesaver. The line goes dead. I sit there for a moment, phone in my hand, toast untouched. Outside, a neighbor starts his truck. The engine coughs, then settles into a rough idle. I know that sound. It's the sound of something that still works but shouldn't be pushed. At 9:30, I go to the grocery store. Same list every week. Milk, eggs, apples, coffee. I stand in the aisle longer than necessary, comparing prices I can afford either way. Old habits don't retire when you do. At the register, the cashier smiles too brightly. Any plans today? I shake my head. Just the usual. That's not entirely true. At 11:00, Daniel's email comes through. PDF attached. Bank logo. Official tone. I download it, print it, and place it on the desk in my study on top of the others. That's when I notice something new. Not the amount. Not the urgency. A forwarding address at the bottom. A property management company. And an apartment name I don't recognize. Luxury. Downtown. I tell myself it's nothing. I've gotten very good at that. Still, when I make lunch, soup from a can, bread slightly stale, I eat standing up. I don't know why. It just feels wrong to sit. By evening, the house is quiet again. I turn on the old radio. Static, then jazz. Eleanor hated jazz. Said it sounded like people arguing politely. I smile at that. A thin one. I don't know it yet. But this is the last day I agree without asking a question. The kettle clicks off by itself. So do I. The first crack was small enough to ignore. It came in the form of a receipt. I found it 2 days later, folded into quarters inside a paperback Daniel used to read as a teenager. Some business memoir with aggressive underlining and notes in the margins. He'd left a box of his old books in my garage years ago. I'd been reorganized and moving things slowly because my knees complained when I rushed them. The receipt slid out and landed face up on the concrete floor. Valet parking. The Beaumont Tower, $68. Dated the same day he'd called me about the escrow mess. I stood there longer than necessary, holding that thin strip of paper between my fingers. $68 to park a car. I remembered when Daniel used to complain about paying for street meters. Said it was a scam. I told myself it meant nothing. Maybe a client meeting. Maybe a one-time thing. People trying to rebuild their lives sometimes pretend for a moment. There's a dignity in that. Or so I thought. But cracks don't stay alone. They invite friends. That evening, I logged into the bank again. Not just my account, the one where my pension landed like clockwork, but the old joint account I'd kept open after Eleanor died. The one Daniel had access to just in case. I hadn't looked closely in months. I trusted the totals, not the details. That was my mistake. There were charges I didn't recognize. Not transfers to him. Those I knew by heart, but withdrawals and payments that didn't match the story he told me. August 14th, LuxFit Private Club, $420. September 2nd, Aurelia Restaurant, $389. October 11th, Skyline Executive Suites, $2,750. I pulled out a notebook, the good one, hardcover, graph paper. Eleanor used to tease me for keeping everything, like an engineer even after retirement. Dates, amounts, locations, patterns started to form. They always do. The mortgage crisis he described didn't align with the spending. The barely getting by didn't fit with valet parking and private clubs. I felt something tighten behind my ribs. Not anger yet. Pressure. Like a weather change you sense before the storm arrives. I slept poorly that night. Dreamt of wires crossed behind walls. Electricity flowing where it shouldn't. Sparks waiting for a touch. The next morning, I called Daniel. Not confrontational. Just curious. Or at least, that's what I aimed for. How's the apartment search going? I asked casually. A beat, too long, then a laugh. What apartment? I stirred my coffee, watching the pale swirl disappear. You mentioned downsizing, finding something closer to work. Oh, that. Another pause. Yeah, nothing solid yet. Market's crazy. Downtown, too. His laugh came quicker this time. Too quick. Dad, downtown? No way I could afford that. I didn't say anything. Silence does work if you let it. Well, he continued, filling the space. I gotta jump. Meeting. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall where Eleanor's calendar still hung. I hadn't had the heart to take it down. March stayed March forever. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove downtown. The Beaumont Tower rose out of the pavement like a polished lie. Glass. Steel. A doorman in a coat that probably cost more than my first car. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Across the street, a cafe with outdoor seating. I ordered black coffee and sat where I could see the entrance. At 3:17 p.m., Daniel walked out. He looked good, not barely surviving. His coat was tailored, his shoes clean, his posture straight. He laughed into his phone free and easy, like someone whose life was not balanced on overdue notices and borrowed money. A woman followed him out, younger, well-dressed. She touched his arm when she spoke. Familiar. I looked down at my hands, age-spotted, steady. The hands that wired substations, fixed breakers, built a life that had once felt solid. I didn't wave. I didn't call out. I paid for my coffee and went home. That night, I opened my email and searched my name. Not Daniel's. Mine. It took a while. Buried threads. Old attachments. Then I found it, forwarded by mistake, months ago, lost among spam and newsletters I never read. A chain email between Daniel and someone named Marcus. A colleague maybe, or a friend. My name appeared twice. The first time was harmless. Financial logistics. Dad's covering it for now. The second time stopped me cold. He doesn't really get it. Old school. Thinks helping makes him relevant. Honestly, if I don't keep him busy with payments, he starts asking questions. I read it again, slower, than the line that followed. It's easier if he believes I'm struggling. Keeps the transfers coming. I closed the laptop carefully, like it might explode if I didn't. The house felt different after that. Not emptier. Exposed. I walked through the rooms, noticing details I'd ignored. The worn arm of Eleanor's chair. The thermostat set lower than comfort because saving had always felt virtuous. The quiet that used to mean peace and now meant absence. I wasn't angry yet. That surprised me. What I felt was something colder. A recalibration. I went back to the study and pulled out every document I had. Bank statements, transfer confirmations, emails, notes. I stacked them neatly, aligning the corners. By midnight, I had a timeline. 5 years of temporary. 5 years of emergencies that never ended. Nearly $200,000. And a son who thought keeping me busy was the same as keeping me blind. I turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment. In the dark, I said Eleanor's name out loud, just once. Then I went to bed, knowing, finally, that this wasn't about money anymore. It was about what comes after you stop pretending. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. The moment came on a Wednesday. They always do, middle of the week, when you're tired enough to be careless. I was sorting paperwork in the study, the old desk lamp humming faintly when my phone rang. Daniel's number. Again, I didn't answer right away, not out of spite, out of instinct. Something in me had started waiting instead of reacting. The call stopped. Then almost immediately another came through, not to me, but from him. A voicemail notification popped up instead. That was odd. Daniel hated voicemail. Said it was inefficient. Just text, he always told me. I tapped it. At first, there was nothing but rustling. A muffled sound, like fabric brushing against a microphone. Then his voice, closer now. Too close. Yeah, hold on, I think I but dialed. A laugh. Not his careful one. The loose one. Another voice joined in. Male. Younger. Confident in that way that doesn't worry about consequences. Because it's never had to. Did you send it? The other man asked. Yeah, Daniel said. He'll wire it by Friday. He always does. They both laughed. I didn't move. I didn't breathe properly either. Man, the other voice said, I don't know how you do it. My dad would ask for receipts, blood tests, a damn PowerPoint. That's because you didn't train yours, Daniel replied. Mine's old school guilt. You just keep the story sad enough. A pause. Ice in a glass. Doesn't it bother you? The man asked. I mean, he's your dad. Daniel snorted. Come on. He needs something to feel useful. After Mom died, he was just there. This gives him purpose. Purpose. I stared at the framed photo on my desk. Eleanor and me. Taken at a company picnic in 1998. She was squinting into the sun. I had an arm around her shoulder, holding her like the world might knock her over if I didn't. Besides, Daniel continued, it's not like I'm stealing. He just let the money sit there until it dies. This way it actually gets used. Used, the man echoed approvingly. Exactly. And honestly, Daniel lowered his voice, but the phone caught every syllable. If I didn't keep him busy with payments, he'd start wanting things. Time, attention, visits. I don't have room for that. Silence stretched. Then the other man chuckled. You're cold, man. Daniel laughed again. I'm practical. The line went dead. The voicemail ended. I sat there for a long time with the phone in my hand. The screen dark now. Reflected my face back at me. Older than I felt. Younger than he thought. Purpose. I thought of all the times I delayed my own needs. The dentist appointment I'd rescheduled twice because this month's tight. The heater I kept low because every dollar saved felt like discipline. Like virtue. All this time, he thought he was doing me a favor. At 3:42 p.m., I stood up and made tea. The kettle whistled too, loudly. I turned it off too late and let the steam fog the window. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. What shook was something deeper, a belief, finally collapsing under its own weight. At 4:10, I forwarded the voicemail to my email, then to a USB drive. Then I wrote the date on a yellow sticky note and attached it. Documentation. Eleanor would have approved. At 6:00 p.m., Daniel called again. This time I answered. "Hey, Dad," he said easily. "You get the message I sent?" "I did," I replied. "Great. So you saw the numbers?" "I heard you," I interrupted. A pause, sharp this time. "Heard me?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "All of it." The silence on the other end wasn't empty. It was crowded. Calculations firing. Exits searching for a door. "What do you mean?" he asked finally. "I mean," I said, "you should be more careful where you leave your phone." Another pause. Longer. "Dad," he began, voice shifting gears. "Look, that was just—" "I don't need an explanation," I said. My voice sounded calm, almost kind. "I just wanted to let you know that I understand now." "Understand what?" "That this was never about helping you," I said. "It was about keeping me occupied." He exhaled sharply. "You're taking it out of context." "No," I said. "I'm taking it exactly as it was said." The line crackled. Somewhere behind him, a door slammed. A city noise. Life continuing unbothered. "So what?" he snapped, irritation bleeding through. "You're mad now? Is that it?" I thought about that. About anger. About what it would cost. "No," I said. "I'm done." There it was. The first honest silence we'd shared in years. "You don't mean that," he said finally. "You'll cool off." "Daniel," I said, using his full name the way Eleanor used to when things were serious. "Don't confuse habit with love." He didn't respond. "I won't be wiring anything on Friday," I continued, "or any other day. You can't just—" "I can," I said, "and I am." He laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "You think you can just pull the plug? After all this time?" I looked around the study. The neat stacks. The labeled folders. The proof. "I'm not pulling the plug," I said. "I'm turning the lights back on." The call ended without goodbye. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because it hurt less, but because the truth, once spoken, stops demanding your energy. And for the first time since Eleanor died, the quiet in the house didn't feel like absence. It felt like space. The next morning, I did not wake at 5:40. I woke at 5:12, already alert, already running lists in my head the way I used to before inspections of the plant. When something failed there, it wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. You isolated the fault. You documented it. Then you cut power where it did the least damage and restored it where it mattered. I made coffee. 2 scoops, not 1. Small rebellion. At 6:00, I opened the blinds in the study and laid everything out on the desk. Bank statements first. Then the spreadsheet I'd kept updating without admitting why. Emails. Transfer confirmations. The USB drive with a voicemail labeled in block letters. Wednesday, 2:14 p.m. I worked slowly, not because I had to, because precision requires respect. At 8:30, I called the bank. "Good morning," I said. "I'd like to revoke third-party access to one of my accounts." The woman on the line sounded younger than my pension. Efficient. Polite. "No problem, Mr. Harris. We can do that immediately. And I'd like a record of all transactions initiated externally over the last 5 years." There was a pause. Typing. "That may take a day or 2. "That's fine," I said. Accuracy over speed. At 9:15, I called an attorney. Not a dramatic one. No billboards. No slogans. A man Eleanor and I had used once when we rewrote our wills after her diagnosis. He remembered my name. "That's never a good sign," he joked gently. "I need advice," I said. "Not revenge." Silence, then a hum of approval. "Good. Tell me." I told him everything. Dates. Sums. The voicemail. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he exhaled through his nose. "You've been remarkably patient." "I mistook patience for duty," I said. He didn't argue. We talked for an hour. About undue influence. About documentation. About how family complicates things the law sees clearly. "You don't owe him continued support," he said finally, "but you should prepare for pushback." "I expected," I replied. At 11:00, I walked to the hardware store. Not because I needed anything. Because moving through normal life felt grounding. I bought light bulbs. The good ones. The kind Eleanor always said were too expensive. At noon, I ate lunch at the table instead of standing. Soup again. But I warmed it properly and added pepper. Small details matter when you're reclaiming territory. In the afternoon, I canceled things. Automatic transfers. Standing payment instructions. The just-in-case access. Each confirmation email landed quietly in my inbox, like doors closing behind me. At 3:30, my phone buzzed. Daniel. I let it ring. Then a text. That we need to talk. You're overreacting. I placed the phone face down. At 4:00, the bank emailed the transaction report. 32 pages. I printed them all. The printer jammed once, then behaved. Machines respond to patience. People less so. I highlighted inconsistencies, circled totals, wrote notes in the margins. Personal expenses, misrepresentation, pattern established. By 6:00 p.m., the desk looked like a case file, because that's what it was now. That evening, I cooked properly for the first time in months. Chicken, real vegetables. I used a cast iron pan Eleanor loved, even though it was heavy. The sizzle sounded like intention. As I ate, I remembered something she'd said once, after Daniel borrowed money for the third time in a year. Helping someone isn't the same as shielding them from consequence, she'd said, drying her hands on a towel. Sometimes love looks like letting them be uncomfortable. I wished she were there, not to comfort me, to witness. At 7:40, the doorbell rang. I knew, before I opened it. Daniel stood there with that familiar posture, shoulders forward, jaw set, already prepared to argue. He smelled like cologne I didn't recognize. Expensive, confident. We need to clear this up, he said, stepping forward. I didn't move. No, I replied. We don't. He scoffed. You're really doing this? Over a stupid voicemail? It wasn't stupid, I said. It was accurate. He ran a hand through his hair. You don't understand how things work now. I understand exactly how they worked, I said. That's why they're stopping. His face hardened. You're punishing me. I considered that. No, I said. I'm correcting an imbalance. He laughed. You think you can just cut me off and walk away clean? I think, I said carefully, that you underestimated how much clarity costs. We stood there for a moment. The porch light hummed. A moth battered itself against the glass. Persistent and foolish. You'll regret this, he said. I nodded once. Possibly. But regret is lighter than being used. He stared at me, really looked, for the first time in years. You've changed, he said. Yes, I replied. I had to. I closed the door gently. No slam. No theatrics. That night, I placed the case file in the bottom drawer of the desk and locked it. Not because I was afraid, because some things deserve containment. I turned off the lights room by room. In the bedroom, Eleanor's side was still empty. That hadn't changed. But the weight beside it had. Preparation isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It simply makes the next step inevitable. The official envelope arrived on a Friday. Cream-colored. Thick paper. My name typed cleanly across the front. No abbreviations. The return address belonged to Daniel's attorney, a firm downtown I recognized from billboards promising solutions in bold red letters. I didn't open it right away. I made breakfast first. Eggs this time. 2. Toast properly buttered. I sat down and ate like a man who wasn't about to be intimidated by stationery. Then I slit the envelope with a letter opener Eleanor gave me one Christmas, because you're always tearing things like an animal. The letter was 3 pages long, polite, firm, full of words like expectation, reliance, implied support. It suggested, without quite accusing, that I had created a dependency and was now abandoning it, that Daniel had made life decisions based on my continued assistance. I read twice. Then I smiled. A real one. At 10:00 a.m., I called my attorney. He's escalated, I said. Good, he replied. So have you. By noon, we prepared a response. Not emotional, not defensive, just factual. Attachments included. Transaction history. Proof of misrepresentation. The voicemail transcript, time-stamped and certified. At the bottom, one sentence stood alone. Any further contact regarding financial support should be directed through counsel. I mailed it certified. Signature required. At 3:00 p.m., Daniel showed up again. This time he didn't knock. He rang the bell and kept his finger on it until the sound became unbearable. I let it ring. I was in the study filing papers into labeled folders. Eventually, the ringing stopped. A knock followed. Harder. "Dad," he shouted. "Open the door." I did, slowly. He looked different now. The confidence had frayed at the edges. His tie was loose, his eyes sharp with something close to panic. "You got a lawyer?" he demanded. "Yes," I said. "You're serious about this?" His voice cracked despite himself. "You're really going to do this to me?" I stepped aside and gestured toward the living room. "Sit." He hesitated, then obeyed. That was new. I didn't sit. I stood across from him, hands loosely clasped, like I used to during performance reviews with technicians who knew they were about to be written up. "You told someone," I began, "that keeping me busy with payments kept me from asking questions." He opened his mouth, closed it. "You said I needed this to feel useful," I continued, "that it gave me purpose." "That's not," he started. "You said," I interrupted, voice steady, "that my money was better used by you than sitting untouched until I died." He looked down at his shoes, the expensive ones. "I didn't think you'd hear that," he muttered. "That," I said, "is the only honest thing you've said in years." He looked up then, anger flaring. "So what?" I vented. "Everyone vents." "You strategized," I corrected. "There's a difference." Silence filled the room. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, counting seconds neither of us could afford to waste anymore. "You owe me," he said suddenly, desperation sharpening his tone. "After everything I've been through, the divorce, the kids, you're my father." I nodded. "I am. Which is why this stops now." He stood abruptly. "You're choosing money over your own son?" I almost laughed. "Almost." "No," I said. "I'm choosing dignity over illusion." He paced, ran a hand through his hair. "You don't get it. I'm leveraged. The apartment, the payments. You pull out now and I'm exposed." I met his eyes. "Then you shouldn't have built your life on someone else's silence." "That's not fair." "Neither was lying to me," I said. He stopped pacing. His voice dropped. "What do you want?" The question hung there, heavy and transactional. It told me everything I needed to know. "I want you to stand on your own," I said, "or fall on your own. Either way, without my money cushioning it." "You'll lose me," he said quietly. "Is that what you want?" I thought of Eleanor, of the way she used to hold my arm when we crossed the street, trusting without calculation. "I already lost a version of you I thought existed," I replied. "This is just paperwork catching up." His face twisted. "You're heartless." "No," I said. "I'm finished being useful to someone who doesn't see me." He laughed bitterly. "You think this makes you strong?" "I think," I said, "it makes me honest." He grabbed his coat from a chair and moved toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped. "You'll be alone," he said, "when this is over." I looked around the house. The quiet, the order, the truth no longer hiding in corners. "I already was," I said. "I just stopped paying for privilege." The door closed behind him. That evening my attorney called. "They backed off," he said. "No further action. For now." "Good," I replied. I poured myself a small glass of whiskey. Eleanor hated whiskey, said it smelled like regret. Tonight, it tasted like conclusion. I stood by the window, watching the street lights flicker on, one by one. The confrontation hadn't been loud. No shouting. No victory speech. Just a line drawn, clean, irreversible. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly where I stood. 3 weeks passed. Not quietly, just without drama, which I learned is its own kind of victory. The first week was noise. Missed calls. Emails that started restrained and ended sharp. A voicemail from an unfamiliar number that said nothing for 6 seconds before hanging up. I archived everything. Didn't delete a thing. Old habit. Evidence likes to be remembered. By the second week, the noise thinned. Silence began to settle in layers. Like dust in a house no one storms through anymore. I noticed changes. The thermostat crept up 2 degrees. I stopped comparing prices at the grocery store. I replaced the flickering porch light instead of ignoring it. Money does that, not having more of it, but no longer bleeding it in the dark. One morning, I went to the dentist. Paid out of pocket. Didn't reschedule. Didn't apologize to anyone for taking care of myself. The hygienist asked if I'd been under stress. Less than before, I said and meant it. At the end of the month, my bank statement arrived. For the first time in years, there were no emergency transfers, no sudden drains, just my pension, sitting where it landed, intact and unashamed. I stared at the balance longer than necessary, not because it impressed me, because it stayed. Daniel didn't come back, not in person, not directly. What did come back were the consequences he'd been insulating himself from. I heard through channels I didn't ask for. Mutual acquaintances have a way of talking when they think they're delivering updates, not warnings. The apartment downtown? Gone. Lease terminated early. Penalties applied. The private club membership? Paused, which is a polite word for cut. The woman with the well-dressed confidence? Temporary, it turned out. Most things are when the money story changes. I felt no joy in this. That surprised people when they eventually spoke to me again. They expected satisfaction, a smile, some declaration of "I told you so." What I felt instead was distance. Like watching a fire you didn't start finally run out of fuel. In early May, a letter arrived. Not from a lawyer. From Daniel. Handwritten. That alone told me something had shifted. He didn't apologize. Not really. He explained. Circumstances. Pressure. Misjudgment. Words that orbit responsibility without touching it. The last line read, "I hope one day you'll understand I did what I thought I had to do." I folded the letter and placed it in the bottom drawer of the desk. Not with the case file. With old birthday cards. Past tense belongs together. I did not reply. Understanding is not the same as agreement. And forgiveness is not an obligation you owe someone who hasn't asked for it. Summer came. Slowly. Warm evenings. Windows open. Jazz on the radio again. Just to annoy Eleanor wherever she was. I imagined her rolling her eyes. One afternoon, I drove out to the lake we used to visit before work schedules and parenthood rearranged everything. I sat on a bench and ate a sandwich I'd made myself. Watched the water move without purpose. A man about my age sat down beside me. We talked about nothing important. Weather, fishing, knees. When he asked if I had family, I said, yes, and left it at that. That was new too. In July, my attorney called to say the matter was formally closed. No claims, no appeals, no more letters with heavy paper and empty threats. You handled it well, he said. I handled it late, I replied. But I handled it. That night, I took the case file out of the drawer. 32 pages. Notes in the margins. Highlights faded slightly by now. I didn't shred it. I boxed it, labeled it, and placed it on the top shelf of the closet. Not hidden. Just no longer in the room with me. Some things don't need to be erased to stop controlling you. On Eleanor's birthday, I cooked her favorite meal. Too much garlic. She would have complained. I set one place at the table instead of two, and didn't feel guilty about it. Loss changes shape over time. So does betrayal. What surprised me most was the quiet pride that followed. Not loud, not triumphant, but steady. I had stopped confusing endurance with virtue. Stopped mistaking usefulness for love. I was still alone, but I was no longer being emptied to keep someone else full. In September, I donated to a scholarship fund at the technical college where I used to teach night classes. Anonymous. Practical. Felt right. At the end of the form, there was a box labeled in honor of. I wrote Eleanor's name, not Daniel's, not mine. Some legacies are built by subtraction. On the first cold morning of fall, I woke at 5:40 again. Habit dies hard. But this time, I stayed in bed a few minutes longer. No one was waiting for me in the kitchen. And for the first time, that felt like freedom, not failure. I paid my son's bills for years. What I got back wasn't gratitude. It was clarity. And that, finally, was worth keeping.